one of the real disservices that all of this excitement and enthusiasm around high growth entrepreneurship has sort of brought on places like the Southeast is that we made it seem really, really glamorous and easy to start companies. And I feel like, I've spent 15 years around, some of the most flawed and some of the most triumphant entrepreneurs. And even I didn't fully appreciate how brutal it is until doing it myself. I mean, as I like to say, there's much easier ways to get rich and famous. And people think, oh, well, if I start a company, I don't have to have a boss. And everyone hates having a boss. This is a great idea. But it's like being the boss is way harder than having a boss. And so I think what's so important, there's always people who think, well, I'm going to be an entrepreneur. And it's like, okay, well, great. What's your idea? And it's like, well, I don't have an idea yet. I just want to be an entrepreneur. And it's like, the idea has to come before that desire, because if you don't have an idea that, whether it's a good idea, whether it's a bad idea, is almost immaterial. But if you don't have an idea that you believe is so important to the world, like you believe every morning when you wake up, you are doing something that, is making the world a better place, is something that the world has to have, there's just no way you're going to get through all of those sort of horrible periods, particularly in your first year. And, that's even if everything goes right. That first year of building a company, I never want to do again. It was, the people glamorize it, and I've talked to so many people who look back and they say, oh, those were like the glory days of, me and one other person in the garage, and we didn't know if we were going to make it. They're lying. I've even now, in our second year, I found myself the other day saying like, oh yeah, those were the good, and I was like, no, they weren't good days. They were horrible days. They're good because we made it through and you can look back on them fondly, but it's brutal. And I feel like now when I talk to entrepreneurs, I try to warn them about what it is they're really getting into. Well, I think the important thing to realize is not everyone should be an entrepreneur. And that's completely fine. The same way not everyone should be an actor. The same way not everyone should be a politician. The same way not everyone can, grow up and be a Major League Baseball player. It is a certain personality type, and it's also a ton of sacrifice. It's every waking hour, and there's a lot of pressure on you. And, for me, I feel less the pressure of investors, because a lot of my investors are billionaires. They sort of know what they're getting into. I didn't raise friends or family money. But a lot of my pressure is the employees. You have people who quit really excellent jobs because they believe in what you're building and they want to help make your vision their vision too. And, every day, even when you're making money, even when you have a lot of funding in the bank, every day that you see that balance diminishing and you're burning capital. And, in the early days, you've got to run this as if you think you're going to be a big company. You've got to make investments for the future. So you've got to really be racing towards that cliff, not tiptoeing off that cliff, or you're not going to get enough, escape velocity. At the same time, there's an end to this funding, and you just hope there's something to grab you when you run off that cliff. Whether that's your revenues, whether it's another round of funding, because the last thing you want to do is go to all those people who you convinced to quit jobs and, tell them that, you're going to have to lay them off. Everybody. And even working at a startup isn't for everybody. I think entrepreneurs get all the glory, but there's a reason that every entrepreneur I've ever interviewed always wants to give credit to their team, because, the teams, they live the uncomfortable life of being at a startup as well. And, maybe they don't have to deal with investors or deal with the board or, deal with some of the other headaches, but it's like they also don't get the glory. And they're the ones who, have sacrificed comfortable 401ks and job security in order to build something that's effectively someone else's dream. And, startups in the best of times are chaotic and they're messy and people fight and there's strong personalities. And, it's not something that's for everyone, but there's nothing that you can do, in my view, that's as rewarding, because you're creating something out of nothing. There definitely is a benefit you get for all that pain, but, you can't be at a point in life where you want to focus on your family. You can't be at a point in life where you want to coast. And you can't be at a point in life where you want security and making money. If you think about Memphis and its heritage with the blues, and you think about that sort of sense of struggle and pain and like holding on to the past. I mean, to me, everything sort of good and everything challenging about Memphis is tied up in that. I mean, I love that, like, I go to Memphis and it's like I can, there's that phrase, you can never go home. Like, I can always go home. I mean, Memphis always feels like Memphis, and it feels different than anywhere else in the world. And Nashville, for all the heritage it has with, country music, which is great, it's a city that reinvents itself. It's a city that continually reinvents itself. Last night, the mayor was talking about all the industries that Nashville's always been strong in and how it moved from like publishing and music like to banking, and now it's medical devices. I mean, Nashville has no problem casting off its past and moving towards the future. And I think Memphis marinates in its past constantly everywhere you go in the city. And that's one of the things that I love about Memphis, but I think it's one of the things that holds Memphis back. I mean, it's one of the things that makes it one of the most unique cities in the South, but it's also one of the things that means it doesn't have the upwardly mobile trajectory of an Atlanta or Nashville. When I was in Memphis writing about business, Atlanta wanted to be the New York of the South, and they wanted to be the Silicon Valley of the South. I mean, they never just wanted to be Atlanta. I mean, Memphis is always Memphis, which is what I love about it. But it does mean that, it's not quite as forward-looking. It's not willing to sort of like slay some of those sacred cows or get out of its own way quite as much. Chattanooga has so many exciting things going on with their broadband investment now, and there's so much sort of real science and technology chops over there. Nashville has so much in terms of, knowing how to be mercenary and get its act together and just go after the opportunity, whether that's in medical devices or, wherever it is. And then Memphis has the strengths in its culture and its scrappiness and its determination and its sort of underdog mentality. And certainly the logistics hub that it is, if you want to look at it more from like a brass tacks point of view, I think if the state can stop sort of warring within itself and pull together all of those assets, because I feel like the state needs all of those things. I mean, as much as being mercenary and looking to the future and getting rid of your past is great, on the other hand, why do people want to be in Tennessee? Why do they want to do business in Tennessee? It's because a lot of that heritage and culture. You whitewash too much of that, and well, people could be in any city in the world. What's particularly interesting about that? I mean, I think there has to be sort of the marriage of all of these elements. And it's, this is what you've seen. The reason that medical devices are the biggest export in Tennessee, it's not just because of Nashville, it's because of Memphis's logistics hub that enables that to be possible, that makes sense for then those companies to be located in Nashville. So I think that's really emblematic of how the state needs to look to all these strengths. And I'm encouraged that Launch Tennessee has, they responded to budget cuts by pushing all of the money out more versus keeping it constrained in Nashville. I thought this conference would be a bit the same way. There'd be a lot of lip service of, this is all about Tennessee and the Southeast, but really it's about Nashville. And I haven't felt that way. I feel like they really do want to be inclusive of Tennessee and the Southeast broadly. And I just think that mentality shift, like I haven't seen in the South previously, certainly not when I was covering business here 15 years ago. It was much more provincial, and I think that's a real step in the right direction.